Welcome to Leading Minds Revealed, the podcast that pulls back the curtain on how today's top leaders harness the power of mindfulness to conquer the fast-paced, ever-changing world of business. In each episode, we sit down with C-suite executives and leaders who share their strategies for navigating rapid change with skill and clarity. Join us as we uncover the transformative mindsets that drive extraordinary leadership. These insights aren't found in business books, and they'll revolutionize the way you lead. And now, here's your host, Michael Apollo.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Leading Minds Revealed. In this episode, we'll explore what it truly means to lead people, not just systems during times of rapid technological transformation. We'll unpack how leaders can stay grounded, human, and effective while navigating AI-driven change, organizational complexity, and relentless pressure for results. Our guest today brings a deeply thoughtful and experience-driven perspective on leadership. He has led large-scale transformations across industries, worked on the intersection of technology, client experience, and people strategy, and has spent decades learning, often the hard way, what leadership really demands of us. He's currently leading global client experience and transformation initiatives within a complex multi-stakeholder organization serving millions of clients across North America. His journey spans executive leadership, organizational transformation, and deep personal reflection on what it means to show up fully for work, for people, and for family. And with that, I'm excited to welcome Vincenzo Ciampi, Senior Vice President of Global Client Experience at IA Financial Group, to the show. Vincenzo, so lovely to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for hosting me today. I really appreciate that.
My pleasure, Vincenzo. I'm really excited to dive into specifically your experience in holding senior leadership roles for a number of years, and speaking specifically around how your understanding of leadership has changed dramatically over time. When you think about leadership today, what do you believe most leaders misunderstand about what their role truly is?
I think one of the most important things is the change of the model of leadership. So in the olden days, let's say 20 years ago, the command and control was the main way of leading. I'm going to have an agenda. I'm going to have these programs, projects, and initiatives, and I'm going to inform you and tell you and make sure you get this thing done. So very command driven. What's really changed so much in the last few years is this more servantile leadership approach, where your leadership job is not so much about telling people what to do, but to guide the team, guide the people that work with you, and to make sure you're serving their needs. Because if you serve well their needs, they will serve the needs of the organization that you work for. So I think the first thing is this change towards servantile leadership. And the other thing is the huge plethora of generations that are all working together right now. I don't think we've ever lived in a time where people are living and working as long as they are now. So you have at least 3 or 4 different generations that could be co-inhabiting a team. You could have your Generation Y, you could have your Millennial, you can have your Xennial, you can have your Generation X, and yeah, we can still see some baby boomers working in different companies as well. So having all these different types of people means that as a leader, you have to be extremely open, extremely non-judgmental, and you have to be an international kind of person where you don't see color, you don't see boundaries, and you work with people in a very open way. And you try to get the most, you maximize what people can bring and what people can achieve by understanding how different each of the people in your team are. Whereas I think in the olden days, we wanted to make everyone the same. We wanted to harmonize and standardize. I think now one of the big changes is to be open and accepting of all the differences that exist within people and treating people like people, not just as owners of a program or owners of a function that have to get the job done. I think that's the big shift, is really the openness, the fact that you need to treat people with a lot more consideration than ever before, and the fact that there's a servantile leadership approach that I think is becoming more and more mainstream. And if you're not a servantile leader, I don't think you're a great leader today in today's construct. Yeah.
talking about command and control leadership style versus the servantile leadership style. You're hearing a lot. I'm hearing a lot right now around the pace of change has amplified, has sped up.
Hmm.
And while we historically have been dealing with change and this, right now AI driven change is the big moniker that a lot of leaders are grappling with right now. It's still change, right? And this
Hmm.
is something that's commonplace. When you think about the role of those two different sort of dynamic leadership styles, command and control versus servantile, I find like command and control could be more like sort of fear based, in essence, almost like constricted, like very determining.
Hmm.
And the servantile is more, like you said, more open, really supporting the
Hmm.
people that you're working with, more human.
Yeah.
What role do both of these play in this sort of current pace of change where I think maybe the default is to go back to a bit more of this command and control where I need to have the answers and determine things as fast as possible?
Yeah. So I think that the challenge people are having right now is the pace of change has accelerated and it's accelerating as we move forward. And so people are grappling with that. We're often hearing people talking about they're overwhelmed, not overwhelming, but they're overwhelmed, meaning that they're actually, their constant state of leadership is one where they can't actually concentrate and focus on what they have to get done because it's changing so quickly. So I think that this is not going away. And the advent of AI is just making it become more and more prevalent. And I think the other thing that's coming as well is that we can't predict the future like we did before. And if we're using the models we had in the past to predict the future, we make a lot of mistakes. So we have to have an open mind. And I think the idea of command and control, it does have its place, but only for a specific reason. So if you're going through some very, very tight timeline where you have something to get done very quickly, you may be able to use a bit more of the command and control for a period of time, but then you have to quickly go back to something more open and more inclusive. The other big thing is that the demographics have changed a lot, and it's more of an employee job market than it is an employer job market. In the early 90s, it was very hard for people coming out of university to find work. At one point in time, things started to shift, especially the post-COVID time. We saw that it was easier for people to find jobs, easier for people to just shop around for jobs. So if you are a very strong command and control leader dealing with new recruits or new people that are just entering the job market, they won't want to continue to work with you because they have other options. Whereas maybe some other generations may be more used to that style, may actually like that style because it's reassuring because that's the style they grew up with. So to try to just be one way and one size fits all leader, I think is a mistake because there are times and there are specific contexts where command and control can be very useful and productive, but I believe it has its time and space only. So let's say, for example, you're going through a reorg and you have to restructure a team. You may have a moment in time where certain decisions have to be made quickly. You may have to gravitate more towards a command and control, but you also have to maintain the servantile leadership, that sensitivity to the people, the change management, the understanding that people are going through turmoil. And if you have both present in your leadership arsenal, then I think it'll be more effective. So I think it's important not to just say there's an old way and a new way. In some contexts, you can blend the two and it can be helpful.
There was a study done in the 90s, 1990s, where by Daniel Goleman, he was a Harvard
Mhm.
psychologist, organizational psychologist,
I
and
know
he
his work.
spoke.
It's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so these
Yeah.
leadership styles, and it was exactly to your point, this command and control, more of like an authoritarian leadership
Mhm.
style,
Mhm.
can be helpful in moments of where there's an urgency
Mhm.
for a deadline, reaching a specific target, project milestone, etc. But at the cost of impact on culture. It's not a
Mhm.
sustainable
No.
style to employ. But this more democratic leadership style, it fosters a stronger culture, and you get a sense of that right now too, right? Like who would you want to work for, right? And so you want to sort of embody that type of leadership style. And I love this sort of generational view that you're bringing.
Mhm.
I know that's really important for you. There's some interesting stories you shared with me around connecting
Mhm.
with your team. And maybe that might even bridge a little bit to this overwhelm right now, where I think you're mentioning that there is a sense of overwhelm by a number of leaders right now on how to sustain through this time of rapid change. And in particular, to sustain focus during this time and to be able to
Yeah.
execute what you want to execute. So, in this time when there is just so much AI driven data and so many emerging, changing tasks and priorities and projects and even strategic directions are emerging rapidly and changing rapidly. What are your ways that you're sustaining through this time to sustain your focus and manage the overwhelm?
So I think that one thing that doesn't change is you always have to have a plan. Could be a short-term plan, a medium-term plan, long-term plan. So if you ground yourself near or behind a plan that you may have devised, but you create a plan that allows for flexibility, then you have a roadmap. And when you work with your teams, you work with your employees, your staff, your colleagues, they see that you're being guided by a plan. So one of the ways to get through all this change is having clear idea of where you want to head to, but the way that you're going to head to, you have to be extremely flexible that it might change. So for example, you may think that you're going to implement a new CRM and you build that CRM, you start building it, and you're basing it off a platform that doesn't have AI in it. And then you meet a new vendor that comes to you and says, hey, we have an AI CRM. So what do? Do you stop everything, or restart and reinvest? Or do you build enough of a good enough first attempt, and then afterwards you bring in the AI? That's an example, but there's many, many examples like that. So what's happening is a few years ago, AI was being talked about as a bunch of projects. Now it's being talked about as we need to integrate it into the way we operate. And a few years ago, like even 2 years ago, the big concern was all around governance and things like that. Now there's still a concern around governance. And some of the most well-spoken and articulate AI gurus are saying there's a danger of letting AI just go rampant and run on its own, because there's a risk of major challenges in our society if we let that happen. At the same time, we hear, we feel in companies that there's a need for using AI to be more productive, to grow, to be more efficient. Because one thing that also doesn't change is there's always this imperative to grow and create more profitability in companies. That's constant, because in publicly traded companies, there's always a need to show growth and profitability. So when AI is seen as a way to get there, then it puts a lot of pressure on companies to implement AI, which sometimes also creates fear, because it means for some people, it might mean a job being replaced. Then you hear people saying, well, it's not the job that's replaced, it's the person who doesn't know how to use AI that's replaced. But if you really think about it, at the end of the day, this automation of using technology and using artificial intelligence as a way to accelerate and grow, the idea is still to do more with less at the end of the day, right? So the AI is sometimes seen as a threat, sometimes it's seen as a tool, sometimes it's seen as a mystery because we don't know how we're going to use it. And then there's still this pervasive fear of it thinking on its own and making decisions where the human is not behind the screen anymore, but the human is being watched by AI. And that's obviously what some of the narrative we're hearing about now makes people scared. But you still have a business plan, you still have a company you're trying to run, you still have targets to achieve, you still have clients to serve. So some things don't really change, but the ways in which you're going to service your client, the way in which you're going to sell to your client, the way in which you're going to understand the data about your client and what your client wants, that is changing very rapidly. And I think the companies that grab that and harness that and run with it and learn and make mistakes along the way, of course, but embrace it, are those that are going to be very successful. I think those that would think it's a trend, it's going to go away, let's just watch from the sidelines, I think those companies are going to have a lot of challenges.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. A lot of strategists in the space, those who I just recently was speaking to the chief financial officer of a company called Georgian in Canada. It's the largest AI focused venture capital fund. And he really mimicked exactly what you were sharing around in a specific industry, this tech innovation industry, specifically in AI, things are changing so rapidly. So I was really interested around exactly what you were just talking to,
Mhm.
is how do you show up as a leader in a time where everything is changing? And it was this sense of openness, having that sense of openness for opportunities, a real strategic focus on opportunities, maintaining that grounded
Mhm.
presence that's
Mhm.
based on these foundational principles, this plan, this values,
Mhm.
this direction that you
Mhm.
want to go
Mhm.
through, and this conviction to just keep going and
Exactly.
figuring it out along the way. I'm interested from what you're focusing on, like if we can riff off of the AI focus for a little bit. What are some of the core things that you and the team at AI Financial are thinking about as core priorities and focuses when it comes to AI? And then where are some challenges that you're noticing that maybe organizations at large, other teams, where there's some challenges or risks that they should keep on lookout as you go through this advancing AI innovation and adoption within the organization?
Okay. Just want to maybe complete the thought around AI, and then I'll give you more of a flavor about what we're working on. The thing that's really paradoxical about AI is that the people who understand it and know how to use it are often much lower on the hierarchical totem pole. And those that have to make all the big decisions, who are more higher on the totem pole, might not know the AI and how it works. So the tension is, how do we bring senior leaders that may not have knowledge to make very important decisions quickly about something they don't master? This is, I think, the big paradox. So the more junior person who maybe is not of a certain caliber or level may be much, much more knowledgeable and have a much better grasp on how to use AI. But the decision makers are the ones implementing AI. So they have to really become much more humble and understand that they don't have the knowledge and they have to go and seek that knowledge. So I think in a time of AI leadership, to admit that one doesn't know is a huge strength, because then it allows the space for bringing in that younger person or that more talented person from a different industry. It's not always related to age, but it's definitely related to experience. So you have to have the experience in AI to be able to be conversant and then apply strategy. And the challenge is there's not a huge number of people that actually have that knowledge. And those that do are often working for startups or working for large, very, very large, the Magnificent Seven type companies, and are paid a very significant salary. So one of the things that companies grapple with is, how do they get internally access to staff like that, at the same time respecting the salary norms that they have in the salary band. So that's just one thing I wanted to talk about. Now, in terms of what we're focused on in our company, we're focused on AI definitely as an enabler. We are using AI in the work that we do, and we have projects that are ongoing. We've been doing that now for 2 years, and we are continuing to scale and grow different initiatives. I can't go into all the details of it because some of it is confidential, but basically we focused a lot on ensuring that we have the right governance in place, which we do, and we have a way to prioritize which initiatives we do. And we also make sure that the initiatives we do add value to the bottom line of the company. And so we look at it either as ways to increase the revenue and ways to increase productivity. We have a number of pilots that are showing early days, good promise to scale them and to do more with them.
There's like an AI narrative bubble, I find, that's
Mhm.
been
Yeah.
generated by a lot of these VC-backed AI companies where they're sort of professing this massive disruption and transformation. And I think they want to increase their valuation as a company. And so if it's going to be massively disrupted, then it should be massively valuable. But when I've been speaking to a lot of leaders right now, it seems like the AI implementation is much more practical. And
It
what I've been
is.
hearing, it's focusing on, okay, integrating co-working with an LLM. This could be Copilot, Claude, Grok,
Yeah.
ChatGPT, et cetera.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like a foundational way of having
Hmm.
teams have these coworkers. And in addition to that, there's automation. So really just assessing
Yeah.
tasks, standard tasks, the administrative tasks that you can automate and that you can and be selective which ones that those might be. And then the next layer is more of like a coding implementation. And this is sort of integrating it from on a platform perspective.
Right. Right.
How does that like is that a similar type of understanding of how you're thinking about it? Or are you noticing organizations deploying this? And then the other one, is it a team by team basis, or is there a standardization across all teams that you feel is more of an optimal type of approach?
So I think what you're describing is germane to what we're doing for sure. In terms of whether or not people have all the teams standardized or whether they have a central team, or I think it really depends. One thing I've seen though is the companies that are having the most success implementing AI initiatives and making it part of their work day to day is typically they'll have a team, a SWAT team that will be central, will be very close to IT, will be very close to different sectors of the company. And that group of people is there to support some of the changes. The one thing I've seen also is if it's not driven, if the changes in the AI is not driven by business imperative and by business leaders working in collaboration with these technological constructs and people and IT, et cetera, then it doesn't really work. In other words, you can't just pilot your way into AI. You have to have a executive owner, a business owner who wants to use the tools that are available today and look for more tools for the future in a way that's going to help the business to grow or to be more productive. That's one thing I've seen across all the companies that are using AI. Those that are successful are those that merge, and you, if you will, the business people with the IT people to work together. And when I use the word merge, I mean working as partners and working in a fusion style. And that tends to work much better than having each team very separate. And the other thing I've seen is if you try to make a massive centralized team to serve everyone, that's not going to work either. So there has to be some of the ownership of the AI in the different sectors, working with a group of experts that can provide knowledge and access to resources. That works well, but it's still very new. So what I'm telling you is what I'm seeing in the early days, and there's a lot more to come.
Yeah, something else that comes up for me that was very aligned to what you were saying is the importance right now of senior leaders to be on the front lines
Mm.
and really connected to the boots on the ground, so to speak,
Yeah.
because the evolution of the technology is moving at such a rapid pace. I think everybody is hearing this sort of sentiment that if you haven't started experimenting and implementing right now, in 3 months, it's going to be new layers of technology,
Mhm.
right? And so you're already gonna be behind, and something that struck me too in our conversations is that is something that you hold dear to your heart, is this openness and ability to sort of meet your teams where they are, right? And what I mean by that is you just have this real sense that you wish to foster that connection with your colleagues, your coworkers,
Yeah.
and your employees. What are some of the ways that you maintain that connection, that openness to dialogue to the teams that you work with on such a large level?
So I think the one thing that's important is to connect at different levels. So the tendency of any leader is to really connect a lot with the direct team that he or she may manage. And I think that that's a mistake, because what ends up happening is you end up creating a team of people that drink their own Kool-Aid and believe they're Kool-Aid, but aren't necessarily grounded. So I think one of the ways that I try to stay more grounded is also to talk to people that are in different departments that are not hierarchically in any shape or form related to me, and to take the time to listen to their stories. And sometimes just asking them, what's your biggest opportunity? What's your biggest challenge? Have you heard about our team? How can we help you? Asking just open-ended questions to people that are completely outside of our day-to-day brings you a lot of value. One of the things I first did when I joined this company that I work for is I went into every call center of our company and listened to calls from clients. And I think I was the only leader who had ever done that before. And the reason why I did that was I wanted to hear what clients thought about our service, not for any other reason. But by doing that, the people that were answering the phones that were actually working, they were flattered because they had a leader in the room listening to them talking on the phone. And they've given their consent, of course, for this. And I remember that created a sense of, okay, this is a person who's interested and cares enough to go into a call center. And so when I would see them in the corridor, they would be more open towards me. Whereas if you are only working with senior leaders, you kind of become an ivory tower, and then you never hear the truth. You always hear everything filtered up, which can be oftentimes not the true, what people live through every day on the phones, on the ground, on the shop floor. So I really believe in the idea of a leader not only being close to his or her team and being very close and very open and very available to their team, but also to spend time on the shop floor. And the shop floor could be a factory, it could be a call center, it could be sales, it could be on the road, it could be a distribution center. Whatever factory shop floor means in a different industry or company, I think it behooves the leader to spend a lot of time doing that. And not just for the appearance of it, not just to look like you care. Because I think the other thing that I've learned is that you can't fool people. If you try to look like you care, but you're on your phone, or you try to look like you care, but you're actually distracted and thinking about the next meeting you're going to go to, people will see that right away. So being present with people, connecting with people, and not only dealing with the senior level, but all different levels, and gathering information on a continuous basis and showing that you actually want to hear more about what they live through. I think it creates a lot of value as a leader. And I think all leaders should try to do that. I mean, the other thing you always hear is people don't have time, which is the same excuse people make for not exercising or for not being in shape or not play basketball or whatever sport you do, or doing martial arts. I think you do martial arts. You have to make the time if you want to make it happen. You have to be intentional. So I think to connect as a leader, you have to make it a priority. And again, it has to be 360, all different levels, different people. And it has to be done in a way that you get a lot of interaction.
I think often in the training that I do in martial arts, and I've trained high performance Olympic teams and other NHL teams and players, I should say. And it's like that 95% of it is showing up, right? That's just getting there and to show up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting. And that's part of it, I think, is just showing up. And what I've heard from a number of leaders too, they're some of the most effective ones out there. It's showing up and being present, and it's just asking those authentic questions. And
Yeah.
so if, especially a lot of us leaders are traveling around so much, and it's like, okay, wherever you are, there's an office, there are people there that you can just find a person, just have a conversation with them. It doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be a town hall, it doesn't have to be
No.
epic arrival. Just have, or it could be an elevator conversation. I know that you love those. That's something
Yeah.
that you love, having those conversations, and then just sharing that openness that I'm here for you. And hey, how about we find a way to connect? And is there
Yeah.
anything else that I can help with? You know,
Maybe I'll just go back to that story of the elevator. I think I told you in our first meeting that I met two people from one of the teams that I managed that told me that they knew I played basketball. And so I told them, as we're going in the elevator, they could join me on Sunday to play. And both of the people showed up that same Sunday, and we played. And then we played the Sunday afterwards. So we played 3 Sundays in a row. And then over the holidays, those two people that I work with wrote me messages on Teams asking me if I'm going to be playing again this Sunday. And now I have 2 people that I didn't even know before, who are part of the larger team that we're working with. And now I know them. And now when we play basketball, we're not talking about work, but there's still 2 people that know they can access me at any time. And the hierarchical level and the management doesn't matter, because when you play basketball, nobody cares if you're a senior VP or a director or a consultant. All we care about is that you pass the ball, you get the ball, and you score, and you defend the basket. And so that's a great story, because it actually brought me closer to 2 staff members that I barely knew. And now I know, and it makes my life better.
yeah. I mean, and it's so interesting from a performance perspective. You know,
Mm-hmm.
there's some really great research out of MIT and Boston Consulting Group on something called collective intelligence. And they
Mm-hmm.
found one of the aspects is this social intuition and this ability to know the lives of people outside of the context of work.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, who's going to go up to bat for you? We need to go the extra mile when our teams are on a deadline, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have that camaraderie, you have that sense of connection. And that, as human beings, is so important, and it's directly connected to performance. And I want to go on to that, because I think there's an interesting paradox that you've spoken about in our past conversations around focusing on people versus focusing on performance. And I want to explore that in a tiny bit, but there's something that you said that struck me around is that value of listening in and value of hearing the truth. Because when you become on the front lines and you have these team members that you're engaging in versus being in an ivory tower when you or you're or you're already inundated with so much data that you might think something is true, but you don't really know it.
Hmm.
And I'm still just trying to grapple this, but I'm already noticing for me, and I've heard this just recently. I actually was speaking to a staff designer at Dropbox, so this
Wow.
cloud computing behemoth. And what they were sharing about decision making, they're finding that AI can be actually impeding strategic
Hmm.
decision making right now because everything looks so darn good.
Hmm.
Everything is a shiny object
Hmm.
and it's presented where, well, not only can I, here's all the information that you need, but I can actually just create all this stuff for you. And
Exactly.
people will just be chasing these fabrications of really synthesized data. But where before maybe we were overwhelmed with a lot of data, now we're overwhelmed with a lot of really synthesized data. Okay.
Hmm.
And something that's come up in a lot of conversations is the human component of it,
Yep.
the human component of listening into these stories, like truly aligning and understanding what matters most for the client, for the customer, for our team members, and really listening to these stories and being present
Hmm.
allows you to have a different type of knowing that you wouldn't get from these AI driven LLMs, and we need to be really aware of that because I know for myself already, my mind is getting really captivated by a lot of these tools, and it's led me in some directions that I was like, "Oh, wow, if I keep on going this way, it's actually taking me off track."
Yep.
And so, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that if you try to AI everything, it doesn't work because there's something called judgment. And right now, AI doesn't have judgment, and that's human, right? So feeling, opinion, judgment, discernment, you can't get that with AI today. Maybe in 5 years from now, maybe in 3 years, maybe in 10 years, we'll teach AI to do that. But for now, we don't. So you can't AI your way out of every situation, and you have to be grounded, as you said. So I think I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? Actually, discernment was the discussion that I've been having with a lot of my leadership peer network as the key distinction between AI and humanity. And so there's this ability to take in whole all the context, all the information from all the relationships and what's happening societally, and to synthesize that into a decision. And I think this is something that we're going to need to really flex. Some people call it lateral thinking, critical problem
Mhm.
solving, but these types of human skills are going to be really important as we move forward. So coming back to this, I'd like to just dive into focusing on the people.
Mhm.
And there's this striking thing that you shared around this sort of this paradox that you shared, that when leaders focus more on people, that results actually improve. But when they over focus on results, people suffer and performance declines. I'd love for you just to unpack that from your own experience.
So when I was younger in my career, I put way more focus on results than on people. And what I found was in the short term, you got exponential results by focusing only on results. But what I learned is that the reason why that happens is because in the beginning, when you first join a team, you first lead a team, you are spending a lot of time with people to drive those results. But when you're result focused only, you eventually pull back and you stop spending time with people. And that's where the exponential growth of results improving starts to drop right away. So if you actually put more focus on the people, you might still get that initial uptick of performance improves, because the reason why usually a new leader coming into a new division, you see an improvement in results, it has nothing to do with the leader. It has to do with that the people doing the work are being watched and are being paid attention to by this new leader. And so they up their game and they perform more. This is actually a big study that was done in Berkeley in California about how it's not the leader. We think the leader is often living in self-deception. That's their wonderful leadership that is getting this result. But then 6 weeks later, 6 months later, maybe 2 years later, everything starts to go down. And that's because those same leaders that got that initial jump in performance have stopped caring about the people because they never did care in the beginning. So I think of leadership a little bit like a relationship. If you only are nice when you want something from people, then they see that right away and they eventually get less motivated. And that before you know it, they'll be looking to do something else or work somewhere else. So I think that truly caring about people means consistently being interested in their development, being interested in how they're doing, asking questions, and actually caring, because that's what motivates people. People want to work harder for you if you care about them. So I learned that the paradox was that when I was younger in my career, I thought, if I put a lot of focus on results, I'll get the results, and the people will figure it themselves out. But in fact, you have to do it the other way around. You got to put a lot more focus on the people. Number one, understanding what is it that they're doing. Do they like what they're doing? Do they have the tools to perform well? Are they motivated? Are their teams motivated? What does the survey look like? That you have data on the satisfaction of the employees that work with those people. Really understanding the person's way of thinking and making sure that the right person in the right chair too. And that's another paradox. We often blame the person for not being the right person. It's actually your fault. If you're a leader and you kept someone in a role, you're responsible for that person's performance too. So I think that the focus on people is very important because it does drive performance, but it also drives people's motivation to want to step up and do that extra mile for you because they genuinely think you care about them. And you can't fake it. Because again, I said it earlier, when you start faking it, everyone is capable of reading when you're not genuine. When you're not genuine, people aren't motivated. And it all
Yeah.
goes back to the servantile leadership, right? Because if you care enough that you want to serve the employee's need, which is their motivation, the way they work, the work that they do, the assignments they get, promotion that they're going to be getting at some point, the development, the learning, and all that kind of stuff. If you focus a lot on that, the person really genuinely feels that they have a trajectory ahead of them, and it motivates them to want to do more for you. Yeah.
It got me thinking as you were sharing there. Right now, we're in an era I find of a relentless focus on automation,
Mm-hmm.
on results and data-driven decision making
Mm-hmm.
that I feel is taking the attention away from that focus that you're speaking to right now. And
Mm-hmm.
so in this AI-driven age that we're in, what's the risk that organizations may the challenge that they might fall into or the risks that they might have by having that type of missed opportunity to focus on the people?
Well, I think it's a retention issue because there was a study that was done by Gallup about a year ago, and it was a staggering number. I remember reading a number that said 48% of your staff right now are looking for a new job. So whether it's 48%, whether it's 39%, point is, if you have a large body of people in any organization that feel that they're not being taken care of by their leadership, that they can be looking for new work. They could be going to work somewhere else. And having a retention issue is a very expensive thing for a company. So you may have saved 10% of this KPI on productivity by implementing a tool, but if you lost 35% of your staff every quarter, you're in huge trouble, right? And so the retention, I think, is I would always look at your turnover rate. If you can manage to transform any organization or team or structure and keep that turnover rate stable or even lower than the average, you know you're in a good place. To me, that's one of your biggest lagging indicators is your turnover rate. And even though we call it a lagging indicator, I think it's actually a leading indicator. Because if people stay, they're not going to go somewhere else. There's a reason why they stay. And then it goes back to culture. So if you don't invest in people and culture, guess what? People will go, and people can go anywhere they want. And I think when COVID hit and everyone started working at home, people were interviewing while they were working because no one could monitor what they were doing. Whereas in the olden days, if you wanted to change jobs, you had to leave your house, you had to go to you had to make up an excuse for why you had to not be at work. With the COVID bubble, everyone was working from home. People were switching jobs for a $5,000-$10,000 salary increase. That, I think, made people understand the importance. And then you started seeing people coming with new policies to bring people back to work. Why do people come back to work? Why do companies want people to be at work? One of the reasons why is because it pays more. Has a better retention. And better retention makes you have more profit at the end of the day, right? So I think when you only focus on transformation, data, AI, you don't focus on the people and the culture, then you have a big problem, which might cost you more than any saving that you generate.
Yeah, it's really interesting thinking it from a human perspective. If you think about any relationship that you've been in, or if I think about any relationship that I've been in where the attention wasn't on me, and I'm not talking all the time, but
Mm-hmm.
it was definitely elsewhere. It just leads to not wanting to be there, and it's fascinating. Just I've never actually thought of it from an organizational perspective, even though I've been, a CEO of an organization for 15 years
Mm-hmm.
and at the University of Toronto held a leadership role and in other organizations held leadership roles. But just bringing it to that just human perspective,
Yeah.
it's staggering to think about it. But then also you start thinking about like what's my next step? And it's really interesting too. You can start getting pretty anxious around what's happening, like what's about to
Mm-hmm.
happen at any time because there's a lack of communication. Right, and it's fascinating. There was a recent study, and I need to fact check this, so it's not fully baked in, but it was something along the lines that a study that was recently done in the U.S. that 60% of employees would rather live in the past. Actually, I think this was Peter Diamandis in one of his recent podcasts with Elon Musk shared this statistic where it was 60% would prefer to live in the past than they would to being in the present moments in
Yeah,
their current
for
role.
sure. Well,
And only 14% would be preferred to actually live in the future. And so there's this like I think there's a lot of a potential for a lot of anxiety around the future and the anxiety around the type of workplaces we're entering into. There's role anxiety, a whole host of that I think could be mitigated by being fully present as a leader,
yeah.
open, just like you said, optimistic, focused on the people, on
Yeah.
connecting with people, with a grounded plan, with solid values on how you're gonna get through this time, and I think you've really conveyed that message here in a very eloquent way, and I'm really grateful for that, and as we come to the tail end of our episode, I'd love to just maybe just get your thoughts on if anybody would wanna connect with you, what would be the best way for them to reach out and to follow your journey?
The easiest way is LinkedIn or calling me on my phone. I respond to my phone. I respond to text messages and LinkedIn all the time. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we'll make sure to include your LinkedIn
Yeah.
into the description here. If anybody wishes to connect with Vincenzo, please do so. Just an amazing discussion to have around how to show up right now in this unique time of AI-driven rapid transformation and how to think about it clearly as a leader. There's a lot I'm going to take away, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to take a lot away from this. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Michael, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. And for those listening in here, thank you so much for tuning in. Great to have you here as well. I would love to hear your comments about this episode, any questions you may have. This brings us to the end of another episode of Leading Minds Revealed. I'll see you on the next one.
Leading Minds Revealed podcast requires more than a conversation. It takes action, research, and collective wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your insights, join the conversation, and help us shape the future together. We'll be back with more stories, strategies, and real-world solutions that are making a difference for everyone. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe, rate, write a review, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too. Thanks for listening, and see you on the next episode.